Hey YouTube, Marko with Marko's Garage here. Today I'm showing you guys, this is supposed to be a 3-carburetor tri-power deal. Fits a Chevy small block engine. Friend of mine picked it up at a swap meet, and these carbs have to be gone through, but as you can see, there's some difference in the carburetors. Not even the linkage is match. So I got a couple other 2 barrels. My goal is to get these 2 matching. If the center one is oddball, I'm okay. And so we're going to take all of this apart and try and make 3 carbs, center one, and then the 2 outside ones. We're going to sort of jet, see if we can match up the jetting. And we got to build some progressive linkage. I got these little ball end heim joints. We're going to run bolts and hook up to all linkage, and we want to do a progressive, so the center one opens about halfway, and then the last half, the other 2 will open up. These are the air filters he's got for it. He said he might have another setup, but anyway, that's just part of what came with it. And then this is a distribution block for the fuel. I don't like this. These red fuel lines don't belong on a vehicle, but I mean, they look cool. But we're going to change that up to be all steel line. It's just the best way. So we can either use the distribution block or just get rid of this altogether, just have steel lines. So let's get to it. We'll start taking it apart, and you come along for the process. So right now I'm just pulling the carburetors off. We can rebuild the carburetors. Like, basically all I need is that the bases are good, the bodies are good, the tops are good, and I can mix match the same series of carburetor. We can make something work, but as you can see, there's hammer marks on the top here. Okay, got them apart. And we got the carbs off the intake. I'm just going to take them all apart. He's got them numbered. Carburetors 1, 2, and 3. So that one would go there. I'd go in the middle. Sorry, number 2. That's number 3. Right away, I could see this has a different top on it than this one, and these face forward, and this one faces out to the side for the fuel inlet. And yeah, these have no, they've been modified. They don't have a choke plate to hold the carburetors when they're cold for high idle. To show you how bad this has been done, somebody actually used a key for a car and just jammed it in there as a washer, as a stop for the idle set. So those will have to be fixed, and yeah, I'll see what we got when we take it all apart. This screw looks like it's cross-threaded in there, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all these carburetors apart, and I'm going to find 3 bases, and then I'm going to 3 middles, and then 3 tops. These carbs, a lot of the parts will interchange, so I'm not worried about keeping them all together. This one is actually broken. Is it? No, maybe. I don't know. It looks like it's been modified to hold the air cleaner on there. So yeah, anyway, let's get to it. Okay, so as you can see on this tri-power, I got a few things done that weren't on camera. I had to go get some parts carburetors. He had some carburetors that had some different tops. This one, the top of it was, this is how the top plate's supposed to look, and it was broken at some point, so they cut it out and they put in one of these metal things. It's not even right, and anyway, so this is kind of junk. So I had to go get a couple of parts carburetors, and so I got 6 carburetors in all, and with those 6 carburetors I was able to come back here and make 3 that are usable. I had to get a couple of matching end plates for these outer carburetors and make these base plates exactly the same, as close as I could get. So one of the things I had to do to this, and I had to get rid of the idle circuits here. I filled that in with JB Weld and a syringe, and on both of the outer carburetors, and so when these plates are closed, You don't want to see any light through them. That basically shuts the two outer carburetors off. This plenum shares all three carburetors share the same plenum. So what happens is the center carburetor, it runs on that, and then when you open that up about halfway, the last half will kick these two wide open. So they open very quickly, and you won't have like linear throttle with all three carburetors. The thing about this is he's modified this intake somewhere along the line, and it's in pretty rough shape. I would probably recommend a new one. I mean, they're available. This isn't something that's not available, so it's not that bad. I haven't pulled these studs out. I'm worried, I don't know, I could Healy coil them maybe and go back to the right size stud. Otherwise I have to actually drill the carburetor holes in the base plate just slightly bigger to fit over these big studs. And I want to get studs in the middle and the front as well. I think they all should be on studs and on these two. So I haven't pulled these studs out either, so I don't know if they're in good shape or not. So I may just have to leave them. With that being said, this is where I'm at with the carburetors. I'm looking at getting all the plugs I need to plug off vacuum ports. These outer ones, we're just going to plug them off, and that's it. They're not going to pull for brake booster or anything off of this. The intake manifold itself doesn't really have a big vacuum port, so we would pull off of the center carburetor for that one. And so with that, I was going to run a 90 and a plug, and then he can use that vacuum port if he needs to. There's also a ported vacuum line here, and then this is the straight vacuum line, and then there'll be a ported vacuum line on the center carburetor. There's a port here that this is going to go on and thread into, and that will give him ported vacuum, depending on whether he wants to run regular vacuum or ported vacuum for the distributor on his vehicle. And the center one also, I want to point out, it's going to have a manual choke cable. I didn't have a nice carb here to set up electric choke, so anyway, all of these pieces had to be cleaned. I did a slight bead blast finish on the outside. I want to throw a little bit of paint on it. I got this gold paint that sort of mimics maybe how these Rochester carburetors came. They had sort of a cadmium plating on there, and just want to put a little bit of color back on them. I'm not going to spray them heavy, just lightly, just to give them that little bit of color. The base plates are painted with cast because otherwise they just turn to rust color and cast. And then these outer linkage pieces will also be painted. I have to weld up the hole on this one and re-drill it. Somebody made a different size hole, and out of all the carburetors, that's all I got that was good. A lot of them were damaged, or they're like on this one, it's a different shape altogether, which would work for the center carburetor, but the outer two I want to match, and so those are the only two that I had that matched these Rochester 2 jets. And then of course this link, when I get the right length, will open both these carburetors simultaneously, and then I have to make a link and sort of a slide rod that'll connect to from the center carburetor to the outer carburetor. So when it gets to a certain point, and it'll have to pick up on a different fulcrum point away from the base plate to be able to get that all set up to work properly. So let me get some paint on these. I also want to talk about on the outer carburetors, I got rid of the idle circuits with the JB weld, and I also am going to get rid of the power valve, and it'll just have the accelerator pump and the high-speed jets. And basically a carburetor, if you don't know how it works, it sits with fuel in the bowl. There's a float to maintain the level, and basically it's like a drinking straw. As you have air flow past the venturis, it acts like an airplane wing, and it speeds up the velocity there. And these here would be like a drinking straw in your glass or whatever, you know, and when you create that negative pressure, the fuel will go up these tubes and then through the venturis, and then the venturis atomize the fuel as well, kind of breaks it up into like a mist, drippy mist, and that would then go into the intake, mix with the air, and your jets determine how much fuel goes through on those high jets. On the outside carburetors, I'm going to run 55 jet size, and then the center a little smaller, and we're going to maybe have to play with that sizing once I get it on the car and tune it, depending on his camshaft and what the engine's built to do. I mean, all of that stuff can change. So being it's 350 cubic inches, and with what I got, that's kind of that's my baseline I'm going to start with. Yeah, so let's just get to it and get some more things. And also I want to point out the screws I cleaned up. You'll see them a little bit later. I'm going to clean each head too with the wire wheel, but I just put them in Varsol in a can and shook them, and it took all the dirt and grime off of these. Did over and over. So the hardware, if you can see, it looks pretty good, other than the floats I didn't do that way. But the screws are pretty nice. If you take carburetors apart, there's a lot of pieces. You may want to organize your screws, even for each carburetor, but I want to make all of the screws look the same on all the carburetors. So I'm going to pick out of the bag the best out of all 6 carburetors worth of screws and make it all look really good. So that's good to do. I'll paint this and show you the next step. So there you have it. That's sort of just a quick shot of it. It mimics the way the carburetors looked from when they were built. So I just thought that'd be a nice look on here. So yeah, I'll get them all done and see how it looks. That'll be see, other than the screws and everything, that'll be how that carburetor will look when it's done, and with the paint on it. And I think that'll be a nice finish to have. So what I'm doing here is I'm just cleaning out the holes. When you tighten down the screws, a lot of times you'll have a burr on the top carburetor plate, and I'm just cleaning that out. Same with, I like to run a thread chaser tap through most of the holes so that there's no issues with screws. I'm just cleaning them off. That paint turned out really good. I have to say that I was a little impressed with the way that turned out. So I'm going to let you know what I used, because that's important if you guys want the same result. There's a company, I think Eastwood makes a special carburetor paint, 2 colors, but Duplicolor has this wheel paint right now. This was at Canadian Tire, and it's this gold color. And if you just spray it on lightly, not heavy, you see a little bit of the cast color underneath, and with this gold tinge it looks just like the way these carburetors came right out of the factory. So it's if you're doing a restoration project and you want to look original, I suggest you go that way. But you can paint them any color you want. But this, I think, this nice light coat. It's durable. It doesn't scratch easy when you put it on light. If you put it on heavy, then you can chip the paint. This is just going to go together really nice. Okay, so we got the carburetors done here on the intake manifold. If you notice, I don't have the gaskets in the base, and I don't have bolts at the back. There's an issue with this manifold. It has to be aluminum welded and then re-drilled and tapped. But anyway, I had to set everything up. I bolted each carburetor down tight with 2 bolts just to set up linkage, get that set up, which once the gaskets are in, I might have a couple just minor adjustments. The carbs are done. They got all the gaskets, air filter gaskets. These are sort of an air filter he's got set up for it. I'd like to see ones that don't clamp here. I want to run studs and wing nuts so that it actually holds the air cleaners down and they don't muck up the carburetor tops, but that's up to the customer what he wants to do there. Everything's done that way. Carbs painted, done. The linkage I got done, and around here, so you can see here the center carb has a hard rod. It's a 55 Chevy, so it has a hard link that you pull on it, and then when you open that, it'll progressively and then open the other outer carbs all the way. So this slides there, and that's all the way open. And then also I have a stopper on the back side, so that when this is open, if these carbs were to stick open, at least your throttle should pull it closed. it's a good idea to have that. So yeah, this is quite a simple. What I did was I welded up the holes on the bottom here, and then I drilled them a little higher up, brought the rod closer to the center pivoting point, and then I welded on a stud here. Use a threaded heim joint, and then this is another heim joint, and this is a 1/4 inch rod. I could machine like brass and then thread the ends so this slides nice, and but the threaded look, he's kind of in a hurry, so that's where it's at. So this also has a choke, but the choke is going to be manual choke. You could have an electric choke, but I didn't have a carburetor that had any of that stuff that was working. So if he wants to run a choke, he can. And yeah, that's the setup. And like I said, the Audi 2 carburetors has no idle circuits or power valves. It's just when they open up, they open up, and it still has the accelerator pumps. Anyway, that's the carburetor setup. So if you like, please subscribe, and have a great day.